Hello, welcome to episode 3. This is the last part of a little trilogy, I guess you could say, that I'm starting the Fallen World podcast with. Because every episode after this is going to be about a more relatable topic, but these first 3 episodes are big and kind of generic. And this one, I did them in this order for a reason. This one kind of acts as the combination of all 3 and sort of the root of everything. So we started with philosophy, talking about the universe and the meaning of life and everything. Then we went into politics, looking at our societies and all of the systems that we have built. And now we're going to take a look at the dark side, which is our own dark side. I'm always going to have a little something in the description for you to read because I need notes to follow along with. And if you want to follow along, you always can. It's not usually going to be this long. Like I said, this is a big episode, and the episodes are usually going to be around 20 to 30 minutes, if even. There really is no specific length, it's just however long it takes to get it done to cover the topic. But these first 3 topics are really big, and this one, I have a huge paragraph that I wrote, so I'm just going to read this all the way to the end, and then I'm going to go back through it and elaborate on some things. I wrote half of it, and then I finished half of it in the middle of the night, so I don't know how consistent it is. I didn't really look it over because I didn't feel like it. Believe me, if I'm putting that much effort into this, I'm not going to want to be doing this. So me getting a little lazy sometimes is how you get weekly episodes. But to be fair, I've got a lot of other stuff going on. I have a job, you know. I'm also trying to write a book that I'm going to put like an audiobook on my YouTube channel so you can watch it, and it'll be set up like this. Like I'll have the name of the book and then chapter 1 and then the link to the chapter in the description, and it'll be on Google Docs. That's currently how I'm planning on writing it and sharing it, so same situation of you being able to follow along in the description, or following a link from the description, because I can't put the whole chapter in the description the way that it's going to be written. It'd be too big. But yeah, not talking about that today. Let's just get right into it. First, I just want to clarify, it was philosophy, politics, and psychology, and psychology it's going to be about like mental health. It's going to be about looking at the real reasons behind things that we do, things that we say, and just sort of looking at the darker parts of ourselves that we often don't want to face. And it's really important that you have seen the previous 2 episodes in order to fully understand this, because I'm going to be touching on a lot of things that I talked about and explained in the previous 2. So, as usual, if you have any questions, go ahead and ask in the live chat of the premiere or the comment section if you're not watching the premiere, and I'll do my best to reply. We all have the capacity to be as cruel as we can be kind, as dark as we can be light, but most of us are afraid to look at the dark. We all react to fear in different ways. You can accept your situation and be afraid, you can deny your situation and ignore your fear, or you can accept your situation and replace your fear with curiosity. We label people like packages and ship them out so we don't have to give them another thought. Our brains are multifaceted and diverse, but no one can do everything. There will always be things you can do that others can't, and things others can do that you can't. Unless you treat people with respect and give them the benefit of the doubt, you can't expect to be treated that way. We're part of a system that couldn't survive a free population, so there are countless attempts to keep us from freedom. Lots of things can happen in your mind. Lots of things can happen to your mind, and some things can make it hard to discern between imagination and reality. Like, I don't know, mental disorder like schizophrenia or dementia, things like that. But your fate is never sealed. You have freedom within you, and only what you do with that freedom can determine how far you'll drift from reality. We see people who've drifted far from reality and judge their behavior, and although their behavior can be hard to empathize with, it's not impossible. We all do inexcusable things, and although we don't all sink into complete darkness, we've all come close. Whether you perceive them as evil or mentally ill, they're not damned to be in darkness forever. Nothing is real except for love and fear, so you can't base delusion on anything else. As long as you look at the world and yourself with unconditional love, there can be no delusion. We can hold on to love through it all, but we need to be able to let go of everything else. Everything else is temporary. Our bodies, our relationships, our thoughts, our emotions, our fears, all of it. Let go of control and allow yourself to flow with the universe. The universe is within you, so you can never lose anything that's real. If it's real, if it matters, it will always be with you. You can't really lose your loved ones. We are one. I wrote that second half as I was up in the middle of the night, not able to fall asleep. And at the time, there was a lot of emotion in it. But I understand, seeing it written now, a lot of this is going to need some elaboration. But I'm only 6 minutes in and I already read all of it, so the rest of this video, I guess, is just going to have to be the elaboration. So, let's start with, we all have the capacity to be as cruel as we can be kind, as dark as we can be light, but most of us are afraid to look at the dark. What that means is that we don't like to acknowledge when we've done something wrong. And if you've seen the previous video, you know that there's been a lot of indoctrination and brainwashing going on in the world in most systems, because systems benefit from controlling you. Like in the US, we have a for-profit medical system, and that benefits from all sorts of things that are not really good for people. And not everyone who's part of that system is aware of it. It's kind of like a chain situation, and it's really just like at the top of it, it's only about money. It's only about making money. There's really no emotion attached to the product you're selling or what you're doing. That's generally how business works. It's just all bullshit. It's lies, and you have to be really aware of that if you're living in the world, and especially if you're living in the US, because this is a problem everywhere, but it's like amplified times 10 in the US. My favorite comedian, George Carlin, he talked about his view on the world a lot, and he's my favorite comedian, I think, because we have a really similar way of looking at things and a similar sense of humor. But that's why I thought, wow, I found someone who thinks the same way I do and makes it funny somehow. But he said, he thinks of it like this: when you're born into this world, you're given a ticket to the freak show. And if you're born in the US, you're given a front row seat. So that's really what it feels like. He sees it as you're either part of the freak show, you're on stage, you're a performer, or you're in the audience taking notes. And he saw himself as in the audience. And that is a really important thing. I'm probably going to do my own, a separate, not my own, this is my own, but I'm going to do a separate video on that topic, but I'm going to touch on it here. It's about detaching from a situation and being able to step back and not really take anything personally, which is really important to do in life, because you have to know that people do not always say what they mean. And it's almost a 100% guarantee that if someone is being cruel to you, if someone is attacking you or trying to one-up you, or trying in any way, shape, or form to make you feel bad, and you can tell that that's what they're trying to do, just step back and understand that that person doesn't mean it. They might not ever acknowledge that. They might not acknowledge it to themselves. They might not admit it to you, but it's still true that they don't mean it. That's not really what they want to be saying. People just react, and people get very focused. People get defensive. It's usually coming from a defensive place. It's coming from fear. And if you go through life understanding that no one who says anything mean to you actually means it, it's a lot easier to breathe. Another trick with that is to go through life thinking that the entire world could end tomorrow. Not just you'll die tomorrow, live like it's your last day alive, but that no one is going to be alive. Like, that's it. And if you're religious, if you believe in afterlives and things like that, take it up a level and imagine that the entire universe, space, time, existence, everything is just going to be gone. You wake up the next day and that's it. There's nothing. There's no heaven, there's no hell. It's just nothing. Everything is gone. And it's as if it was never there. If you live every day thinking that everything is going to be completely gone the next day, you're going to have a bit of a clearer sense of what really matters and what's really important. And I'm not suggesting that you believe that in such a literal way that you get all reckless and go do crazy things that are going to mess up the rest of your life. But I would hope that goes without saying. I hope you wouldn't need to be told that. But, like, it's true, though, because even though the entire universe isn't just going to stop existing tomorrow, there's really no way of knowing that it doesn't already exist or not exist, because this is all we've ever known. This is all we've ever had, and we really don't have anything to compare it to. So how can you say that this is existence if you don't have an opposite to compare it to? How can you say which is which? How can you say which is a dream and which is reality? What's nothing and what's something, if it's all the same thing, and if it's all we've ever known? So when you think about it like that, you realize that we focus a lot on things that don't matter, and it can be blamed on the culture, it can be blamed on things that are taught to us and hammered into our heads. And, there are a lot of cults too. And I feel like the US system itself is kind of a giant cult, because it really just, it uses fear to control people. The education system is funded and I think designed by the government, the justice system. Think about the justice system and what that really means. People will say, oh, well, you did this, so you've done some very bad things. You're a bad person, so you're going to go to jail. And people will look at you, the person on trial, and they'll judge you, and then the jury will decide that you deserve to go to jail, and all these things. These people who are in courtrooms, they're not philosophers, they're not moral philosophers. They have barely an understanding of morality as a concept, and yet they're acting like it's objective, and like this is the objective best way to reward and punish people based on what they do. And even the people who are found innocent still have to go through hell and back just to get to that point, because the system is not kind to you once you're accused of something, even if you didn't do it. And the reason for that is that the system is based on Christianity, the idea of heaven and hell. Jail is sort of like hell, and it's like it's this very end-all be-all mentality. You're either good or you're bad, and then you're damned for life. And we say, oh, we'll give you a 10-year sentence, we'll let you out, and we'll call it a correctional facility, and you get rehabilitation. But what are you really doing when you're getting this rehabilitation? Is it actually good for your soul, or is it just good for their wallets? And that's, I think, the question that people skip, because do you see these people who come out of prisons seeming mentally healthy and more stable? No, they just hate the system that they're part of, because now they've seen the darker side of it. They've seen how terrible people are treated in prison, and they've been treated like they don't matter, like they're just human scum, a waste of space. And even if they're let out, what kind of therapy could possibly help you from that? You need something way deeper to recover from that. But we don't offer that here. The solution that people actually need to become healthy is often buried, covered up. No, we don't want people to learn that. We don't want people to learn how to take care of themselves, how to heal, how to live a healthy life and be independent. We want them to depend on us. We want them to take our medication, and we want them to think that there is something wrong with them so that they keep coming back. So we have all these labels, all these things of, we're going to call you this and we're going to do this, and then we're going to put you in this category, and then you think you are this category, and then you have to go around, and then people, and then it spreads like a wildfire as people talk about it, and then they form their own little subcultures. A culture is a cult, by the way. It's the same thing, and that's why the word cult is in culture. But they form these little sub-cults, and then they're all talking about it, and they have no idea that they're spreading something that's harmful or damaging. They think that they're talking about mental health awareness and helping people, and it is good to talk about mental health. It is still not something that's talked about a lot, but it's become its own little subculture, and there are groups of people who get really pretentious and have a gatekeeper mentality about a lot of things, which it is what I wanted to talk about in this video, because I think I mentioned it last week, and I want to talk about what is actually going on there, the psychology behind it. So people who gatekeep, which basically means they're guarding something. They're saying, no, this is, you're not allowed to say that, you're not allowed to do that. This is for these people, this is for that people, or for whatever it is, you're not allowed to do that thing. And there's a time and a place to do that, and it's very rare that you're in the right time or place to do it. Most of the time, you need to just let it go and focus more on how you can empathize with the person who you're about to shame for doing something, because people don't do that at all. People get very, very self-righteous. And the reason for this, there's a ton of reasons, but I think the most common reason is that it's bigger with the younger generation, but I think even with people who weren't raised with technology, technology is so powerful that once you have a phone that can pretty much do anything, the whole world at your fingertips, it becomes really easy to get sucked away from life. And in nature, we're meant to be present in every moment. If you have a pet, if you have a dog, if you have a child, a toddler, you notice that they're there in every moment, and they can be very one-track minded, which means that they're present. You know, you could have a little kid who's just crying for the same thing over and over again for like an hour, and you're thinking, don't you have something better to do? Don't you get tired eventually? Especially with a newborn baby, they will nonstop cry. And I remember in my own childhood crying for something, and or waiting for something, you know, even if I wasn't crying, if I just was like standing somewhere waiting for something to happen. And nowadays, the idea of doing that is unthinkable. You're like, no, this is a waste of time. I need to be doing something else. And you can't just be there waiting for anything to happen anymore. We don't wait now. We're just constantly go, 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 because we're taught to be busy, very, very busy, one thing to the next, no breaks. And we really only get a break when we sleep. This is extremely unhealthy, and it's one of the main reasons that we have really bad mental health in the U.S., because the U.S. is very based on capitalism and the economy and profit, and it's not about overall profit, it's about profit for the already wealthy and keeping them in power. And if you pay attention to how things actually work, it's pretty clear that that's how it's set up. It doesn't help everybody. It's not for you. So, you know, people just have been so damaged by it that they don't even understand that that's not normal, that they could have it so much better. All you really even have to do is take a look at how other countries are doing and think, wow, I could have it so much better. Why don't I? Because I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. You've been bullshitted. That's all it comes down to. But people don't like to think that. A lot of people will, if you're like, oh, if you ever met someone who escaped a cult, you might think, oh wow, what was that like? I mean, it must be so weird and life altering, and you must be thinking, wow, like my whole view of reality is different. I could never do that. Well, you already are. You think that you're awake? You think that you're not already part of a cult? I don't care where you are in the world. I'm sure you have plenty of things floating around in your head that you've based your habits on, whether it's coming from a place of trauma. You're not paying attention to it. You're not focusing on where it's coming from, and you're just letting it run your life. And it's like being in a cult. And when you wake up and you realize how much of what you do, how much of what you want, how much of what you think isn't actually coming from you, it's coming from what you were told to want and told to think, and sort of crushed into fear. And when you realize that, the whole world starts to look totally different. And religion is a huge part of that. I think the reason that Christianity is one of the biggest religions is because of how profitable all the Christmas stuff is, all the Christmas songs and the decorations and everything. There's just no way that that there would ever be a war against Christianity. A lot of Christians are like, there's a war in the media and they're trying to shame Christianity and take it down. No, they're not. No, they're not. I don't know what you're seeing. I don't know what you're thinking. You have to acknowledge that not everything you see in the media is about pushing an agenda. Some people just have personal opinions, and the overall bigger picture, Christianity is always going to be at the top because that's what's best for the economy. And in a world without Christians, it would be pretty different. There'd be a lot of things that couldn't be profitable anymore, and there's so much money to be made from holidays. So that's what a lot of holidays are. Like, it really, there's so many holidays throughout the year, and everybody just wants to sell you candy for it. Valentine's Day, Halloween, Easter, Christmas, whatever it is, just sell you this, sell you that. And I think Christmas is the most profitable because people, there's Christmas music. There's so many Christmas related things. They make tons of movies about Santa Claus and everything. And I think one thing I just want to touch on real quick, for my younger viewers who don't know, I hate to shatter your reality, but Santa Claus is not an actual person. There isn't a fat man who comes down your chimney and eats your cookies and puts stuff in your stocking and under the tree. Somebody else in your house is doing that. Maybe your parents, maybe who your guardian is. But if you have presents under the tree that are signed from Santa, it was not actually a fat man named Santa who did it. And that is something that most people tell their kids, and most people feel justified in doing it because they think that their kids need to believe in magic and they need to all of these things. But what they don't understand is that magic is not something you have to lie about. There are plenty of actual magical things that people aren't even aware of. The universe is filled with magic, and you don't have to make anything up. That's just going to damage your kids. Then when they find out the truth, because that's inevitable, they're just going to become a little bit more cynical. And that's really what happens is we break people down and we turn them into cynical people because we start realizing that things aren't as rainbows and sunshine as we thought they were when we were a kid. So we have this mentality of you grow up and you lose your spirit. And that's why there's all these movies about getting the Christmas spirit and everything. And it's like, well, why not the Christmas spirit? Why not just connect with actual spirit in the universe, and not just Christmas time, but all year round? And if you want to believe in Santa Claus, believe that the spirit of Santa Claus is what drives your parents to do what he would do. You can think of it like that. And that I cannot emphasize this enough. There is no such thing as real and not real. If you can imagine it, it's real. People like to judge people for being separate from reality. You're delusional. You're this, you're that. And people, I think, as a culture, are learning to stop using actual mental disorders to insult people, like saying, what are you, a schizo or a psycho, things like that. And people don't usually use the word crazy, but people do still think of each other that way, even though they're not using the language. And this is a problem that George Carlin pointed out, which is that changing the language doesn't really change the situation. You can change language sometimes. For example, a lot of things that are geared toward males. You could like man-made things like that. You could change it to human, and there's an extent where you're taking it too far and it's pointless. But it really doesn't matter. It's just like sometimes it's okay to change the language. Sometimes it actually does provide a psychological change that helps us think of things in a more inclusive way. But for the most part, all of these language changes that have taken place in popular culture lately are really just, I mean, not even lately, but just throughout history. It's always been a problem. And it's a matter of trying to hide the dark things that are actually going on. And by focusing on the words instead, you're distracting from the issues. You could say, don't say the N-word, as if that's going to eliminate racism. You could say, don't say handicapped or crippled, and you're supposed to use this term for disabled people or whatever. And if you don't use the right term, then you're a bad person. There's all this judgment going on. And it's like, first of all, let's actually talk about what a disability is. Technically, everyone has a disability because there are plenty of things that I can do that you can't do. There are plenty of things you can do that I can't do. Nobody can do everything. And that's really all it is. If you're disabled, whether you are missing a leg or an arm, you're blind, you can't hear, you can't breathe on your own. Maybe you need oxygen tank, like whatever it is, whatever your condition is, it's no different than something that I can do that you can't do. There's no one who can just completely do everything, but we do have an idea of the ideal human who doesn't have any sort of disability, and it really it perpetuates conformity and the idea that we're all supposed to be like robots and the same, make everybody think alike and act alike. And people don't realize that when you acknowledge that everyone is different, you can actually be more respectful. Because right now it's like, oh, well, I would say this to you, but oh, if you have a disability, then I won't. Then I'll be more respectful and sensitive. Well, why wouldn't you just do that anyway? Like, what are you going to just assume that they're stupid? Like, if you find out that someone has a mental disorder, some kind of reason to be like slow, then you're going to be patient with them. You're not going to be rude to them. And it's for an ego reason, because you're afraid of being a bad person. You don't want to be called out. But why wouldn't you do that to anyone? Why is it like, oh, if you don't actually have a diagnosed mental, like, slow disorder, whatever it is, then, and you're just a regular person who's acting that way, then I'm going to judge you and decide that you're just stupid and you're ruining the flow of my day, and I'm going to make sure you know that. Like, people are so entitled and rude and unempathetic, and it's because of the way that we teach people. We don't teach people why we need to be respectful of one another. We teach them in a very judgmental and demanding way. Do say this, don't say this. And then it's the same fear issue of you're teaching people to be afraid. They don't want to do the wrong thing. They want to be the good person. They want to be on the right side of history. Well, that's good that you have a good heart. That's good that you have good intentions. You don't want to be on the wrong side of history. But remember that being good and bad, it's not really about what you do. It's about what your intentions are. And if you're doing it out of fear, you're missing the point, because we have to remember that, like I said earlier, nothing really matters. If the whole world was going to end tomorrow, what would matter is what lasts, because everything is temporary. Everything. Your body is going to die. It's going to wither away, and you're going to be nothing. And your life as a human being is constantly progressing toward its end. So if you start basing all of your goals around material things, it's going to be just as temporary as your body. And if you believe that you are your body and that you'll stop existing when your body does, my only question for you is, what is the point of doing any of this then? You really haven't put a lot of thought into it, and I can debate with you on that all day if you want to, but I'm more interested in knowing the reason that you would want to believe that we are our bodies, because there's a lot more evidence that there's something more going on. And I think I explained it pretty well in my first video, the meaning of life. But I think that the universe and everything within it is infinite. I think that consciousness is part of the universe, kind of in its own dimension, and sort of like a body of water, and you can take some of that water and put it in a bottle, and that bottle is your body, and you have to remember that you're still part of a bigger body of water without your body. You don't just stop existing, you become part of the universe. So the real question is, what are you? Are you your body? Is your consciousness just sort of a trick of the mind, brain firing off in all directions and creating the illusion of free will and consciousness, but in reality you're just like a really complex robot that's made by nature? And if that's the case, then why are we able to be as deep as we are? Why are we able to feel like we're all interconnected and like we all matter? Why, when we think about something that really matters, when our instincts take over, do we feel like we're not hoarding? You can be in a situation where you start hoarding everything because you're afraid you're going to lose it. Life or death, what do you choose? Are you going to be like, I won't jump in front of my friend to save them, I'm just going to take care of what I have and run off? Or are you going to say, no, this is what matters more to me? Because that's really what you have to think about at the end of the day. Where do your values come from? Why, what matters to you? Why does it matter? And people don't like to think about this. It's stressful, and there are a ton of reasons people have all sorts of trauma in their personal lives. There's the bigger picture with the system. There's all sorts of factors that play into why people are the way that they are, but the bottom line is you don't know why they are the way that they are. And it's not your place to judge them. It's not your job to figure it out. It's just your job to understand that you could just as easily be in their situation. And while it's true that you might make better decisions, you can't judge them for not making the same decisions as you, because they have free will. That's part of their test the same way that it's part of yours. And even though you might have a tendency to make better decisions than them, you're still just as capable of making all the same counterproductive and harmful decisions that they do. A lot of this will make more sense if you've seen the last 2 episodes, and I know I keep saying that, but like seriously, you should watch those. This trilogy is the most important part of the podcast as a whole, but the future episodes are what I'm really excited about. Those are going to be fun. Those are going to be a little less stressful and shorter. This might be a long one. I don't know how much more I have to say, but I know I have about 8 minutes until it's 40 minutes. Okay, so how much have I covered so far? The universe is within you, so you can never lose anything that's real. Okay, so I wanted to talk about like people who hold on to things. You hold on to your relationship. So I don't want to lose, I'm in love with this person, I'm in love with this person. You said focus on unconditional love. There can be no delusion if you have unconditional love for everyone and everything. So I'm in love with this person and I want to hold on to them, but they're leaving me, or maybe they're old and they're dying. Maybe it was my grandma, whatever it is. Maybe it's a relationship and they want to break up with me. And you have to remember that just because something is ending, it doesn't mean you have to hold on to it in order for it to have been real, because it already was real. And in order to imply that they need to stay with you longer, that suggests that what they gave you wasn't enough. And that's an insult to them. That's an insult to the relationship that you had with them, because you had something beautiful and you're saying that wasn't enough. You're being greedy. And that's not coming from a place of love. That's fear. That's about hoarding. That's control. So you have to be able to catch yourself in that distinction, because you could say have love for everything and easily make that same mistake. Well, I love my grandma and I don't want my grandma to die, so I'm gonna make sure she sticks around as long as possible. But what if she's in pain? What if she's suffering? What if she's just waiting for someone to come whisper in her ear, it's okay, you can go, we'll be okay without you? And that's not an insult to say we'll be okay without you. She's ready, because death, which I'm going to be talking about next week. The first episode was the meaning of life. I think next week is going to be called the meaning of death. I'm going to talk about death, and I'm going to talk about what happens when we die. I'm going to cover all the different beliefs of what happens and why I believe what I do. So you don't have to worry about it being preachy or me just spitting things at you and trying to get you to believe something. That's never my intention. My intention is never to control people or make them believe something. It's just to get them thinking, and it's just to give them new information that they may or may not have already had. And I spend a lot of time thinking about this. I love talking about it. I learn from talking about it. So to be able to talk about it and share it with the world is just, I mean, I feel like what else could I be doing with this? It would feel like crazy to not do this, to just keep it in my head. So I do feel like I have to do this. And you don't ever have to worry about it being preachy. If I ever sound like I'm being preachy, just let me know. But it's definitely not intentional. So yeah, when you die, it's a release and it's a relief because you're letting go of that body that you're a part of, and you're saying that you enter into the human experience. I believe in reincarnation. I don't think we come here just once because there's so many things that we need to learn. We're not going to be able to do it all in one lifetime. And you can tell people who've done more work based on, looking at their lives. Usually people who are really practiced in life come into the world and have a lot of trauma right off the bat, which activates their intuition and makes them more interested in doing work to help people and be of service to the universe and to the light and in service of love. That's really all it is. You're saying that I'm connected to everyone and everything, and I'm not going to be selfish and controlling. I'm just going to acknowledge that I'm part of the universe, and sort of like a white blood cell in a bigger body, I'm just going to do my part and be humble about it. And that's actually when you feel your best, because you're aligned with the reason that you were here in the first place. And a lot of people don't know how much better they could have it. People are like, well, I want to be happy. Everybody wants to be happy and healthy. And everybody wants to have money and fame and fortune because they associate it with being happy and healthy. Because being rich, you can kind of get whatever you want and think, well, that's like ultimate power and freedom, and how could that not make me happy? But people don't do this part of it. People don't think about philosophy, politics, psychology. They cover these things very quickly and briefly with just trying to get over it. But they don't understand that these things are never over. You're never done learning about these topics. You're never done thinking about them. And it's not as it's meant to be something that you can apply to your life every day, and to work on your connection to the universe, to spirit. And if you don't work on that connection, you are going to find that you're not really getting anywhere in life. And when you work on that connection, you're able to separate from the system that is trying to take away your own power to heal yourself, to take care of yourself, and to live your life. And they're just going to label you and call you all sorts of things. And these disorders, ADHD, schizophrenia, I think there's a ton of other reasons that people have these that are not talked about. And I think in general, it's good to know that when you have a different perception of reality than what other people have, it doesn't always mean that yours isn't real. Just because your brain is making you see something that other people don't see doesn't mean it isn't there. Sometimes it might actually be there. Sometimes it might only be in your imagination. But that doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. That doesn't mean that it isn't real. And that doesn't mean that you have detached from reality and are sinking away from reality, and you don't belong in a group of people who are in touch with reality. Because as long as you have free will, and as long as you're alive, you will have free will. You are always going to be able to choose between love and fear, which is really choosing between truth and fiction. And when you start making fear-based decisions that are all about ego and control, it's about you, it's about how can I protect me. I'm focused on myself right now. I'm afraid. I want to have control over everything. And when you realize that your goals and your thoughts and your decisions are coming from that place, you have to acknowledge that that's not realistic. That's when you're separate from reality. And when people are in that state, they can go real deep. They can get really dark, and to the point where they can be so dark no one would deny it. A serial killer, someone like that, someone where you take one look at them and you're like, wow, you are just shrouded in darkness, because they've gotten so pushed away, and the system does nothing to help these people. This is the system does nothing to help them reconnect with spirit, reconnect with truth. These people who've drifted from it so far that they have no sense of who they are anymore. They fed the dark for too long. Nothing we do is helping them get back to the light. Everything we do is just damning them further and pushing them deeper down, because we treat them like they're already damned, and we look at them like they're evil, and we hate them. And hate is a whole thing. I mean, these things that I'm talking about are going to have to be their own videos, because I can't talk about all of it today. I'm almost done, just based on how long I've been doing this. I don't want to go for more than an hour, but like, hate is a form of control. Hate is about, I wanted this thing to go this way and it didn't, and I'm mad. So rather than let it go and roll with change, I'm going to try and control it. Everything is constantly changing. You have to be able to roll with it. You have to be able to accept that death is just change. That's all it is. When someone dies, when something ends, it's still there, because time is an illusion. It's all just as real. The past, the present, the future, it's all the same thing. And you have to be ready to let go of something when it's ending and move on to what's next. And you need faith to do that. When you have no faith, or when you have faith in something that was man-made, I think all religions are man-made. I think that there are bits of truth in all religions, but for the most part, they've been kind of transformed into ways to control people. And a lot of the older religions that were more based in spirituality have been kind of swept under the rug. They're not mainstream anymore. So mainstream spirituality is very, like, colorful and magical, and like astrology, and look at how I my planets say this and that, and oh, I got a psychic reading, and isn't that so cool? And it's like, people don't really think of it as a whole philosophy, or a whole way of life, a whole way of looking at things. People don't think of it as the missing link to make everything make sense. They just think of it as like a cool thing that isn't that nice. And there's all sorts of versions of it. There's like people who get into like witchcraft, and they're really like into all this specific stuff, and paganism, things like that. Like, these things are really popular, and I don't want to get into it right now, because, like I said, I'm bringing up a lot of topics that are going to have to be their own separate videos eventually. But I think that people forget that the whole point of the universe is that it's so infinite, it really can't be contained. And spirituality is not meant to be specified to the point where you can fit it inside of a religion. It's meant to be infinite and ever expanding and changing, and you're always meant to be learning. And the one thing that you can count on that's never going to change is that having unconditional love for everyone and everything is always going to be your top value. There's never going to be something that's more important than that. And you could think of like Martin Luther King talking about justice and all the reasons that people don't want to stand up for justice. They're afraid that they'll lose their job. They're afraid of this, they're afraid of that. But what are you really more afraid of? Just betraying your integrity, your dignity, and losing yourself, and letting something happen that you know in your heart isn't right. It's hurting someone else, but you let it happen just because you don't really think that it's your job to do anything about it. and deep down you know damn well that it is, and you just are too afraid to believe it. Maybe you don't think you have it in you. That's another thing. People don't think that they're capable of it. People don't think very highly of themselves. They think, oh, I'm not strong enough to do that. I'm too tired to do that. I've been beaten down. I don't have the energy for it. Whatever it is, you just have to do it, because there's never going to be anything else that's more worth your while. And it's just it drives me nuts how judgmental people are, and how they still act like they're good people. There are so many people nowadays, the gatekeepers, who just take themselves way too seriously and get way too picky about political correctness, to the point where they would be willing to throw away friendships and relationships over like little ridiculous things. And I understand having to cut off friends who are toxic, who are actively feeding dark energy and have no intention of putting anything, like the friendship is one-sided, they're not putting anything back in the pot, and they're not really showing you that they are going to be there for you while you're there for them. And I think there was a study that said that conservatives are more likely to want to be friends with everyone than liberals, and liberals are more like, well, I'm not going to be friends with someone if you believe in A, B, or C, and conservatives are like, we can have different beliefs and still be friends anyway. And the reason for that is because conservatives don't really have a lot of self-awareness, and they don't really understand that something as simple as, you can't contribute to racism and then expect a black person to be friends with you. And that's just an example of it. I'm not saying that that's what it is every time, but it's sort of like different variations of that situation when people say that. It's just coming from a place of entitlement, that you think that you can just do whatever you want and everyone just should be friends with you anyway. Oh yeah, I can just go around and slit people's throats, and why wouldn't you want to be friends with me? Like, I don't judge you when you do weird things. And it's like or like a perfect example of and this is an exaggeration, but this is a good way to explain what I'm talking about. Imagine that there's a man who goes around beating people up, punching people, and he just does this for fun, for no reason, and it's just his hobby. And then he's friends with a man who is gay and sleeps with men, and he says, I don't care that you sleep with men. I beat people up just for fun. Like, if you let me do my thing, I'll let you do your thing. And it's like they try to compare it, because a lot of the things that liberals will cut off friends for are things that really are non-negotiable. There's no question there. A lot of the things that conservatives believe are a choice. It's based on their religion, it's based on this, it's based on that, but it's something that they chose to believe. And a lot of the values that liberals stand for is more based on things that are innate. The color of your skin, who you're attracted to, things like that, where you can't really do anything about it. So it's obviously, conservatives are not that in touch with reality, but a lot of them don't understand why they can't just be friends with everybody and not change their views on anything. They think that they're being intolerant, and there's no pausing and saying, wait a minute, maybe I could do something differently. Which, I'm going to end this with that, because that's actually the perfect thing that I wanted to talk about. This is a lesson that I've been having taught to me repeatedly lately. I think sometimes if you notice that a theme keeps coming up, it's spirit trying to show you that you're supposed to pay attention to that lesson. And what it's been for me the past week is the value of stopping and saying, do I really want to be doing this right now? Do I really want to be saying this right now? Because we often act out of habit. We just kind of say what we're saying, do what we're doing, and we don't really stop and say, should I be fighting for this? Am I barking up the wrong tree? Why am I really doing this? Would I rather be doing something else? There's not a lot of stop and asking ourselves why we're going where we're going. Because we get so, like I said, it's that holding on, it's that rejection to change. We don't like change. We don't like working with it. We don't like flowing with it. We're afraid of death. We're afraid of anything that is major. And COVID hit us like a ton of bricks because it was major change, and people couldn't handle it at the beginning. People were freaking out. And even now we're still like we've gotten used to it, but we're still just, holding on by a thread, and people are still reacting to it in their own way. But it's become a lot more clear who actually cares about other people and who doesn't. It's become clear who values empathy and who just cares about themselves and wants to be cynical and paranoid. And I like that it kind of shows people's true colors. But I might do a video about COVID, honestly, because that is quite an important topic, I think. But and relevant. But you have to be able to let go of things that you're holding on to, these habits that you have, and you want this to happen. You need to be able to say, okay, I know that this isn't what I usually do. I know I've been taking this stance in this argument, but maybe what if I change my mind? I think that's the best way to word it. What if I didn't do this? And it's sort of like when you're headed in a certain direction, to just stop and ask yourself, what if I didn't say that? What if I didn't do that? So not even in an argument, just everyday life, every situation, just try to catch yourself every so often, maybe like every half hour. Just try to say, what if I didn't do this? What if I did it a little differently? And just keep yourself active that way, and so that you don't get sucked into habits. So that's the best piece of advice I could give you in regards to mental health. And I think really the best thing that you can do is just look at everyone the same and treat everyone with the same respect that you would treat anyone. Treat people the way you want to be treated, basically. And you don't have to really understand mental disorders and brains and mental health to know that everyone's brain is different. I think the mental health that really needs to be talked about is the way that we neglect our mental hygiene when we get so focused on being busy. And that's what this system does to us. So the suggestion that I just gave is a good way to help with that, to keep you active. And it could also help to set aside time to just meditate. I was planning on doing guided meditation videos on here a while ago, but I never got around to it, and I honestly can't promise that I ever will, but I'm not closed off to it, so if I start uploading those at some point, feel free to watch. But if you just want to take like 10 minutes in the morning to just have like silence or listen to some kind of soft music and just sit there and let your mind go on a little journey, take you wherever it's going to take you. You could sit and say to Spirit, show me what I need to do today, and see what you get in your mind. Don't do it for more than 15 or 20 minutes, because then your imagination will start to take over. But if you do that for like 15 to 20 minutes, you could actually start getting some vision of what your day is going to entail. But you have to remember to take it with curiosity, not control. It's not about trying to get the right answer. It's not about hoping that you can do it right. Just sit there, don't expect anything, and just be open to whatever you see. There are better ways to learn to strengthen your communication with Spirit, but it's not really mine to teach, and I haven't learned it yet myself, but I know a lot about it. And if you want to know what I'm talking about, I have a playlist on my channel called Ivy Rivera Free Mini Classes, and she is this extremely smart person who I discovered a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic hit. And she has like 80 or so videos, sort of like what I'm doing, where she talks about these topics, but they're all related to psychic mediumship and spirituality and things in that world, because she's spent a lot of time learning about it and understanding it herself, and she can give you a whole new perspective on things. So if you're interested in that, she also teaches a psychic mediumship course where she teaches you how to connect to your roots, and she's had people this is relevant to mention, she's had doctors and therapists come to her and say, I have clients who I've been seeing for years, and they spent a few months at the Ivy League Psychic Academy in your psychic mediumship course, and problems that they've had for years are just gone. Their issues just started melting away, really, like nothing. And it's because she teaches people how to balance their energy. And she's mentioned that one therapist said something like, you wouldn't expect to eat 10 hamburgers and not gain a lot of weight. You have to be mindful of the energy that you're taking in, the time that you spend around people, and what you're giving out, where you're spending your energy. And just be careful and think about it. Understand that energy is all around you, that you are energy. Everything is energy, everything. So that's sort of like with the water metaphor, that's kind of what you are. You're energy in a vessel. And part of the human experience is you're either in control and mindful, or you're neglecting being mindful and you're kind of susceptible to being manipulated by other energies in the universe, which that to me is the only thing that I could call losing touch with reality, that I could call delusional or insane. And I would never use the word delusional to describe someone who actually has some type of mental disorder or whatever it is. I don't like to use words like disabilities and disorder because it's really just different. They're just different, and that makes it sound like it sounds negative. It sounds like they can't do this, and it's like, well, of course they can. There's tons of things I can't do too. You don't call me disabled. So it's just, I would never use that word to describe someone who isn't coming from a place of fear. And I'm going to end this video here. If there's anything I didn't cover, go ahead and ask questions in the comments, and hopefully it'll come up there. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next week.